My name's Patrick Gillett, and I'm from Hempen. Hempen is a cooperative based in South Oxfordshire, and we're going to be talking today about growing hemp with or without a license. And we're going to be talking with the co-founder of Hempen, Joe McGahan, co-founded Hempen with me and some others. And we've also got Camilla Hayselden-Ashby, who is a hemp farmer down in Kent. Is that right, Camilla?
That's right.
And has done some research as well into the international best practice around in the hemp industry that she'd like to share with us today. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about some of the political challenges of growing hemp with regards to getting a license from the Home Office. As many people may or may not be aware, you need a license from the Home Office to grow industrial hemp in this country. And industrial hemp is defined as cannabis sativa with a THC level below 0.2% in the UK. That's a sort of arbitrary level defined in UK law. And to be able to legally grow in this country industrial hemp, you need that license from the Home Office to grow industrial hemp. We're going to be talking a little bit about our plans to change that via some mass civil disobedience, some things that are already happening and some things that will be happening in 2022 and beyond. And we're going to be hearing about why hemp's such an important crop in the first place, and why we can't really wait for the politicians to allow us to grow it, and we actually have to just get on with growing it, given where we are with the ecological crisis, social crisis, financial crisis, and the huge challenges for British farming at the moment in the current climate. So I should also say that it's the first time I've presented a Zoom conference, and I'm normally very happy in a room full of many people talking, because I can see you all smiling and hear the feedback and read the room. I can't see any of you, and so you'll have to excuse me if there's any sort of strange pauses or confused looks. We've got some tech support in the shape of a wonderful volunteer, Abigail. So she'll be watching out for your questions on the chat, and Camilla we'll have a time towards the end for a significant discussion and question and answer session, really, and potentially some discussion if that's possible with the tech. So I'll launch in a little bit with a bit more of an intro about Hempen and how we started, and then I'll pass you on to Joe McGahan shortly, who's on the phone. So yeah, as I said, my name is Patrick Gillett. I've been involved with Hempen since 2015, when my good friend here, Joe McGahan, started telling me about how his hemp experiments to build a rural resilient community using the power of hemp were going, and he'd been growing 27 acres. Well, he'd just sown 27 acres in 2015 after a number of years of experimentation, and he was pretty convinced that he could grow the hemp, he could process the hemp, and he even had tried his hand at selling the hemp, and he wanted my help to make it a business, a cooperative business, and a community. And that's how I got involved. My background and how I knew Joe as well is a background in environmental social activism. For many years before that, involved with the climate camp and its sort of wider movement around climate change, community organizing around the Heathrow villages, lots and lots of direct action campaigns, lobbying campaigns, stopping the criminalization of squatting, many things, but involving the full gambit. And it was out of all of that campaigning and looking at all of those crises that we faced that I really realized that I had to build, not only for myself, but in the wider world, a sort of comprehensive set of solutions that I could live within and help to support other people with. And so the idea of a rural resilient community as a as a base from which to do that, and also the beginnings of a little model to share, to humbly share, was very inspiring to me, and that's why I got involved back in 2015 when Joe asked me to get involved. So we began setting up that cooperative, and early on we discovered a little known thing at the time called CBD, cannabidiol. We were growing our hemp, the 27 acres that Joe had planted, just as he asked me to get involved. We were growing it for seed and fiber, and we were going to harvest the seed and make oil, make foods, and make cosmetics out of the oil, as we now do. But some friends came to us and said, you see that field you're growing, that could be worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds as CBD. And we said, I mean, we didn't believe them, basically. So we went and researched it and found out that there was some truth in it. And so we thought we better learn about this. And indeed, they were right. CBD was a hot new thing, the hot new food supplement, health supplement, a wonder product, basically. And as part of full spectrum cannabis oil, minus the THC, it was an incredible health product. So we wrote off to the Home Office and said we'd like to harvest the CBD, harvest the CBD as part of the essential oil, basically, and never heard back. So we got on with it, and our business boomed. Really, we were the main UK producers of organic CBD products, and as a not-for-profit cooperative. Lots and lots of people volunteered to help us get started. We didn't have much startup capital or anything, but we had a lot of help, a lot of startup love, as I cheesily call it. And so volunteers came, helped. Lots of people volunteered their time to get Hemp going, both as a business, as a going entity, and as a community. And we had big growth year on year. And everything we made, we invested back into building that community, buying equipment, storage, facilities on site, that sort of thing. And that was all going very well until 2018, when the government decided that they were going to change the guidance around harvesting of CBD, basically, and made it clear that we couldn't harvest for CBD in the UK, and that instead we would have to import from abroad, even though CBD was, of course, a legal product to sell in the UK. UK farmers apparently weren't allowed to harvest for it, which we thought was strange. So we decided, okay, well, we'll bring out our activist campaigning skills and campaign against that, whilst just growing for seed and fiber. So we tried to do that in 2019. We applied for a license. We got our interim license. The Home Office took a long time to decide, but we were allowed to grow whilst they were deciding, because we were renewal. And in July, when the hemp was as big as as high as my head in the field, the Home Office came back to us, and for various reasons that we'll discuss later on, said that they weren't going to grant us a license, because in the past we'd harvested for CBD, even though we told them all along that we'd been harvesting CBD and they'd never had a problem with it. And we told them each year that we were harvesting CBD on our growers' notes. And so we had to destroy our 40-acre crop. Now that crop was worth £200,000 to us in seed and fiber products that we'd created a market for. But had we been allowed to harvest it for CBD that year, which we knew we weren't going to be able to because of the 2018 guidance change, it would have been worth £2.4 million in CBD products retail value. So that was our situation. Our lead farmer, James, at that time, didn't fancy facing a 40-acre cultivation of cannabis charge. Very understandably. He's 60 years old and wasn't sure he'd frankly survive at the trial. And so we regrettably had to cut down this beautiful crop. We were thrust into the media. We were thrust into the limelight. That day, it happened to be the case that some documentary makers were coming down to film us by chance. They filmed the crop destruction. That went out, that went viral. The mainstream media picked it up. The Guardian did a big piece. The BBC did a big piece. And the sort of campaigning started from there. First, we decided we wanted to campaign to allow licensed farmers to grow the whole plant. But now we, after 2 years of trying to get our license back and being refused and apparently being black marked, despite doing everything our lawyers have told us to do and getting all our ducks in a row, we've come to the conclusion that we're not going to get a license on our farm. Our partner farms are still all getting licenses. So our business can continue in that fashion. To a degree, they're getting licenses. They're not all actually, and it's not straightforward, as I'm sure we can discuss further later on, because the licensing process itself is extremely convoluted, can involve 4 different logins, 4 different passwords, endless bureaucracy that farmers frankly don't have time for. And then when you do get rejected, you don't really know why. You might be given a reason, but it might frankly not be the real reason. Just to give you an example, one of our farmers recently was rejected because there was a bed and breakfast within a mile of his field. And others have been rejected because there's been a footpath near their field. Now, our crop here was next to a school, and the school used it as an educational resource very successfully. And the Home Office didn't seem to ever have a problem with that. So it seems like there's some arbitrary decisions being made on their part. And as a result, after a couple more years of trying to get our license here on this farm and various farmers we work with as well getting rejected for different reasons, we concluded that actually, we should say what we really think, which is that you shouldn't need a permission from the Home Office in the form of a license to grow a crop which, according to the World Health Organization, has no public health risk, no public health risk. And accordingly, the UN says that actually it should be exempt from all international controlled substances, and therefore doesn't need to be a controlled substance in the UK either, according to the UN Convention on Narcotics, 1961 and 1971. So that's where we've got to today. Today, we've decided to launch Overgrow the Regime. We're going to overgrow the hemp regime through mass direct action and civil disobedience. Many growers, farmers, and hemp enthusiasts have come to us saying, look, we'll grow hemp. We'll grow it publicly. We'll put our name to it. We'll grow it in our fields. We'll grow it in our allotments. We'll grow it in our gardens and on our windowsills. And when we all do it, we'll all stand together. And if they want to prosecute someone, we'll all support each other. We'll all build a legal defense together, build a media defense together on that as one. A prosecution to one will be a prosecution to all. But more importantly, we'll force the government to tell us why hemp is indeed, it is currently criminal to grow industrial hemp when there is no public health risk. And that's a really important part of the campaign for us. Either we get to all grow hemp en masse, or if we do get taken to court, we get to force the government to justify why it must be criminal. Because at the moment, it seems like it might be that it's being used as a barrier to entry and a way of the government controlling who can and can't grow hemp for their own reasons, perhaps vested interest, perhaps more corrupt. If it's for a legitimate public reason, we'd love to hear it because they've never put it on the record. So that's where we're at today. But why are we doing it? Why is hemp such an important crop? my colleague Joe McGahan is probably one of the most learned people I know on this, and his brain is a rabbit warren of information about growing hemp and what you can do with it, and processing it into, let's say 50,000 different products. But we haven't really counted properly. And he's worked with farmers all over the UK, internationally, different growing setups, and really is one of the most foremost minds on growing hemp in the UK. And so he's going to talk us through a little bit about why it's such an important crop for us, for us as farmers, us as Britain, and us as humanity in the times we live in. So I'll pass you over to Joe now.
Hello everyone. This is a slightly bizarre format to be talking to you, and made even more bizarre by the fact that I'm actually having to isolate at the moment in a place with not very good internet connection, so I can't see you, can't see the slides at the moment, which is very frustrating. But so I'll just talk about it. But if it doesn't make sense with what you can see, that's because I can't see it. But yeah, hemp is absolute wonder crop, as Paddy has outlined, and offers like huge benefits economically, socially, environmentally. Has a number of different attributes. So you can basically grow it in a couple of different ways. The main historic use of hemp as being as a fibre crop. So the fibre is 21 times stronger than cotton. It was huge part of the sort of formation of our society into the form that it is now. So when King Henry VIII was on the throne, it was illegal not to grow hemp because it was so important for the ropes and the sails that enabled the exploration of the world, and fighting naval wars with the Spanish and such like. So it's been a huge part of our history, and been a huge part of the way that our society has been formed. And it's just crazy that we've gone from a situation where it was illegal not to grow it to a situation now where it's being restricted in the way that it is. When it is grown in that way, there's a huge amount of different varieties of hemp. Hemp grows from the equator to Siberia. It's very, very adaptive crop. So the crops that are grown for fibre and for biomass are phenomenal plants. They'll, in the UK, have been sort of standing dwarfed by 4 or 5 metre tall plants that have grown in 3 months. It's just absolutely amazing in terms of carbon, and like the production of biomass. It can produce more than any crop in a temperate climate, and in a form that is incredibly useful. So it can be used to make carbon negative buildings, which is absolutely what the world needs right now. It worked on a few projects using hempcrete, which is the process by which the fibre is taken. The fibre runs along the outside of the stem, and then the middle of the stem is comprised of a substance known as jiv or the herds, and that has a lot of different uses as well. Like the oldest paper in history is Chinese parchment that is made out of, and historically that was another major use of hemp that was a complete game changer, was the formation of paper and the ability to grow paper in this climate, and spread ideas and all the other things that paper enabled us to do, art, etc. And so, yeah, the process by which those parts are separated is called decortication. Has been using fairly heavy machinery, and that's available in the UK, but not as widely as it should and could be. It's mainly located up in the north of England at the moment, in Yorkshire, North Yorkshire. There's some in the Midlands, but in an ideal scenario where we had hemp being grown on the scale that it should be, we should have regional decortication plants which are accessible to farmers so that they can process the crop in this way. But aside from that, the latest thing that I've got into personally is building with it directly in the bale, because especially in the context of there not being the processing capacity that we need, the ability to grow a hemp crop in a field and then build with it locally in a way that has virtually no embodied energy, just like a bit of fuel that's gone into the tractor, and then whatever very, very minor transportation costs, and then you're looking at like a way of building that is locking up huge amounts of carbon. There's sort of foremost studies that suggest that building using hempcrete, you can lock up to 9 tons of carbon up in a house. Hempcrete can also be used very effectively to retrofit buildings. It's a breathable material, so it's very good with historic buildings. I think in order to combat climate change, I really believe that building carbon negative buildings is really our best option. We can't just knock everything down and start again. So, we also need to be able to retrofit the buildings that we've got with natural materials to make them fit for purpose and properly insulated. And hemp is by far and away the best option for that. So those crops, to grow it in that way, the crops are the seeds sown around in April to early May, and that's very good, particularly for organic farmers, as it does offer more opportunities for weed strikes before than cereals that are sown earlier in the year. And then the seed crops are sown later still, with the fibre crops, you'll be looking at in excess of 10 tonnes an acre in terms of biomass, and from a small field you could be looking at growing 2 to 3 large houses, and then onwards. So it's a very productive way of growing and building. A recent study that looked at said that if we put there's the housing crisis, as we need to build 1 million homes. If we wanted to build them in a carbon negative way with hemp, we'd only actually need to put 10% of the arable land in the country over to that land use, and then we would have done that. So it really offers the potential to move from a scarcity mindset with regard to climate change and lots of other things into a kind of abundance philosophy, where actually if we can build in this way that is super sustainable, then really it's the more the merrier. Then the other major attribute of the hemp crop is that is the seed, which is again phenomenal. I mean, hemp just makes a mockery of the phrase "Jack of all trades, master of none," because it just seems to be absolute Jedi master of everything that it turns its attention to. The seed is a complete source of protein. It is so it has all 9 essential amino acids, so your body can build any protein that it wants from the hemp seed. It's also an amazing source of unsaturated fat, very healthy fat, the sort of fat that your brain is made out of. It's also what your body lubricates your joints and creates mucous membranes out of, so it's protecting your lungs against pollution and lubricating the gut. And like to me, it's no, I subscribe to the theories that like the reason why the vast majority of major human settlements are on rivers or coastlines is not only for sort of transportation, but because we were dependent on fish to grow the large brains that we find ourselves with. And like those fats are exactly what is contained within the hemp seed. And yeah, so it's an amazing opportunity to do that and derive that nutrition wherever we are, wherever there's a suitable field. And then, yeah, beyond getting the seed, so there's then the cannabinoids, which Patrick touched upon, and yeah, they're absolutely amazing source of medicine. CBD particularly, which is abundant in hemp, is the most amazing anti-inflammatory, it's anti-inflammatory, anti-spasmodic, muscle relaxant, and so many conditions, so many problems humans are linked to or resulting in inflammation in the body. So people take these compounds for anxiety, stress, and then just a huge range of medical conditions that involve inflammation and tension in the body. And it's really interesting. Like one condition that's very well documented with that is epilepsy. And a recent study shows that it needs to be, it's much, much more effective in its natural form as a complete oil, full spectrum oil, rather than a synthesized or isolated compound, which has been the way that there's largely been, the government has been trying to push it in that direction, which I think, is potentially because the thing that they don't want us to realise or to know is that we can grow incredibly effective medicine in our own gardens. Not even just in our own gardens, like, potentially in our own attics, in our own wardrobes, anywhere, window boxes. It's such a versatile plant, and it grows so abundantly. It really is just an amazing resource for us to use.
Great. Joe, I don't know if you can see the slides, but do you want to tell us a bit about the benefits to soil? It's a big feature that people want to hear about, growers in particular, and how that relates to carbon in the soil as well.
Yeah, I can't see the slides, so
okay.
So it's amazing. So agronomically, it's amazing as well. So it has an amazing root structure, has a deep taproot, and has this incredible ability to mine minerals that have been leached into like soil pans So it has, just the root mass in itself has the great potential to reinvigorate the soil through putting organic matter into the soil, but also as it draws up those minerals into the root mass, it can then, particularly in a minimum or no tillage system, the roots of subsequent cereals will follow those the channels that have been made by those roots as they've decomposed in situ, and resulting in some studies sort of saying 15-20% greater yields of cereals following a hemp crop, particularly the large hemp crops. So the seed crops, sort of growing hemp as a seed crop, they're they're smaller plants that flower earlier, and then the seed ripens, and then it still is harvested quite late on in the season, which is good, in terms of like if you're using contractors or whatever to, or there's pressure on the machinery on the farm to harvest other cereals is later on. So that is an attractive quality, but they are smaller plants. But as a break crop, you'd want to grow it as a fibre, or house, to grow houses, or all of this kind of stuff. And that growing it like that, it will not only crowd out any weeds, but it will provide this amazing root mass that remineralizes the soil and increases subsequent yields of cereals.
And do you want to say a little bit about the biodiversity benefits as well, just briefly?
Yeah, so it's been ecological surveys have shown that more, particularly seed crops, support a larger amount of biodiversity than any other crop. There's just seen like huge amounts of wildlife in and around our crops. There aren't really any. Well, the pests that you would want to watch out for really are like rabbits at seedling stage, and then potentially deer later on. But then as the seed crops come ripen up, then you see like finches and other birds feeding on the seed. Everything loves the hemp seed. Like, fish love the hemp seed. Chickens love the hemp seed. Like any spoiled or wasted seed that we've ever had has been greedily gobbled up by chickens. All of the omega-3s that are in the it's omega-3, 6, and 9 in the perfect balance for the human body. But yeah, not just humans love that. But, chickens love that, and it's put into their eggs. The ducks that we have up here, they love the hemp seeds as well. So yeah, but it grows so vigorously. It doesn't. We've seen like bees actively foraging for large amounts of pollen, which was kind of surprising because it doesn't produce nectar. So we're wondering what's going on, but they seem to love the pollen. Have like lime hawk moths that wrap themselves up in the hemp leaves, and amazing, beautiful caterpillars. But apparently none of it really seems to bother the plant too much, except for the rabbits at seedling stage and the deer. So it's worth protecting against them.
Amazing. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe. That's great to hear why it's such an important plant, and some of the sort of technical and horticultural and agricultural agronomic details of how we can grow it and why that's important ecologically speaking. Camilla.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if that was a bit disjointed because I couldn't see the slides. So.
No, thank you so much for presenting that from your isolation with the lurgy, the dreaded lurgy. So yeah, amazing, thank you. So we'll have, so just for everyone listening, we've got much more time later after Camilla to ask questions of Camilla, Joe, and myself about anything that's been talked about. But now I'll just hand over to Camilla, who's hemp farmer down, a new licensed hemp farmer down in Kent, and also has done a fair bit of international research on international best practice in the hemp industry. So over to you, Camilla.
Thanks, Patrick. Hopefully you can see my screen all right now. So Patrick's just asked me to share a little bit about our experience as first-time hemp growers under license this year, and also I'm doing an off-field scholarship researching how to kickstart hemp growing in the UK and how farmers can take advantage of this profitable and sustainable crop by learning from international examples of countries with more established hemp markets. So I'm also going to be talking a little bit about that and how their licensing regimes and growing infrastructure differs from ours. So a lot of this about why grow hemp I won't dwell on too much because Joe's explained it far better than I could. So my family farms in Kent, just on the edge of the Romney Marsh. We have a 350 hectare mixed farm with sheep and arable crops. And I started looking at diversifying into growing hemp about 3 years ago. Initially, it was the opportunities in the growth in CBD that attracted me, but as Patrick explained, that's off the menu. And so I started looking at other applications for hemp. And that was actually when I became really excited about the crop, you know, to find out that there's a crop that we can grow in the UK, which is a really nutritious food source, and you can use it for building and for textiles and for biocomposites. So these are all UK produced brands and projects, and that has all of these agricultural benefits, so sequestering carbon, having low input requirements, shading out weeds was a big one for us because we've had a huge blackgrass problem on our farm, and so finding a lower input way to deal with that was really exciting for us, as well as biodiversity and improvements to soil health. So aside from making the business case to persuade the rest of the team on the farm that we should be growing hemp, one of the first challenges that I encountered was getting a license. So this is perfect timing from home office, the screen that I saw last night when I was trying to submit a license application for adding an additional site for growing hemp to our license. And I think it sums up quite aptly the hemp licensing system as it stands. So we first applied for a license in 2020, and I think they've changed the licensing process a little bit this year from what I've seen, but it basically is the same for anyone who's looking to grow and wants to do so with a license. The application window just opened this week and closes for first-time applicants at the end of February, with final applications due in at the end of April. And that's probably one of the first challenges that you have, because if we're looking to grow a crop which is drilled in April to May, and we can only find out if we'll be allowed to grow it in terms of licensing for, well, we've just been able to submit the license, but we don't know when we'll find out if that's been successful. That makes planning a rotation, ordering seed, thinking about how this is going to fit in with the rest of our production, having supply contracts, anything like that, very difficult. And in terms of information that you need to supply, things like you need to supply a criminal record check, where you're going to grow, your end use for the crop, which if you're a new grower isn't as straightforward as it might sound because you're probably experimenting, how you're going to destroy the controlled parts of the plant, so the leaf and flower. But the issue that we specifically had when we submitted our license in 2020, which is why what we thought might be a month turnaround process turned into several months, was that our original site application got rejected, because even though the guidance for sites for growing hemp in the UK on the regulations say that there's no longer restrictions on where it can be grown, our first 3 sites that we proposed were all rejected. And this is out on the Romney Marsh, not a densely populated area, but one field was rejected because there was a footpath near it. Another one was rejected because it's near holiday rental properties, which we own. And we had a third one which was rejected because of footpaths. And in fact, when we looked at our farm, there was only 3 or 4 fields on the whole farm, which based on those restrictions would be suitable, because everything else either borders a road or is next to a footpath. And when we finally got our license, it was because we proposed that we would only grow half of the field, so it would be away from the road, and then we would plant a maize crop around it to provide a screen. So that was an additional cost that we had to undertake in order to get our license and get it through. And moving on from that, I'll just talk a little bit about our experience growing. So we drilled, I think in the end it was start of May. Here you can see the plant as it's beginning to emerge. You do need the soil temperature to be quite warm, ideally around 10 degrees, and it needs some moisture to get going. And this was in early July, so you can see for scale that's a ridgeback, so quite a big dog. Already it's getting going. Very low inputs required. We actually didn't put on any fertilizers for this crop, and there aren't any pesticides permitted for use on it in the UK. But if you look at the guidance and trials that have been done, suggested around 50 to 100 kilograms of nitrogen will provide you with an optimal yield, but that's still very low compared to conventional cereal crops. And the thing that's really exciting when you're growing hemp for the first time, like we were this year, was this was on the 5th of July, and this was a month later on the 8th of August. So you can see there that it had grown so tall that I couldn't even touch the top of the plant. So that's well over 2.5 meters tall. For context, the variety that we were growing was one called Pheromon, which is a dual use variety, which means that it can be harvested both for the seed and for the fiber, which was something that I was very keen to do so that we could experiment with both of those end uses. And this is just a shot of the understory. This is in September, so the plant's beginning to senesce, go to seed, so you can see the leaves are yellowing. But I think what's really interesting to see here is this, how dense this canopy is. It almost looks like a photo through a bamboo forest, and that underneath at the ground level, you can see it's actually very little growing. So it is doing that job of shading out weeds and acting as a natural weed control method, which is one of the things that attracted us. And then we come on to harvesting. Because we were harvesting for seed, we were looking at that September-October window, and it was something that I'd been dreading all season. Most of the rest of the growing had been very straightforward. We used a conventional drill. Everything that we used actually was standard arable equipment, because this is just a trial. We weren't in a position to invest in any new kit. And so we harvested this with our combine harvester, which is a class Lexion, just with the header bar set to a high height. And fortunately, it came off extremely well, but you do hear a lot of basically nightmares that people have had with harvesting, the plant getting wrapped around machinery, because those fantastic long strong fibers, which make it great for construction and textiles, also love to get wrapped around equipment. So if you are looking at growing, that's definitely something to be aware of, and also something that comes in if you're cutting for fiber and baling. It can also get wrapped around baler equipment parts. And then on the left, you've got the seed that we harvested after it had been cleaned, and then this has just been dried on our open drying floor, the same as the rest of our crops. And on the right is the standing stubble, which we're stand retting, and then we will be cutting and baling at the beginning of next year. And you can see in the bottom right already that stem material beginning to break down so that you can separate it into the woody shiv and the fibers that Joe explained about. So as I see it, the big challenges, and something that through my research and trying to work out how we can address for expanding UK cultivation, are licensing, which Patrick's talked about a lot, agronomic knowledge, because there isn't much hemp being grown in the UK, only about 800 hectares. There isn't the availability of both advice on the best methods to grow from agronomists that you might have from a standard crop, and also there aren't varieties available that are bred for the UK. We're reliant on the EU variety list at the moment. And so because the way that hemp behaves is latitude dependent, there aren't very many varieties which are optimized for the latitude that we're at in the UK. Harvesting equipment, I've just talked a little bit about. And the last one is processing facilities, so access to facilities to separate out, particularly for fiber, and also then those established routes to market, which at the moment they're coming. There's definitely a lot of interest from both from construction and from textiles and from car manufacturers to use hemp, but it's linking together the farmer and grower and user, and a bit of a chicken and egg problem, getting both the scale of farming and the scale of demand to match up. So looking at international hemp growing and where we fit in, the UK is a tiny, tiny, tiny drop in the ocean of the global hemp production. The market's currently valued at over $3 million, and it's projected to, 5x by 2027. So there's clearly a huge potential there, and it's a really growth area, but something that at the moment we're not tapping into. So I think it's really important that we should be looking to what are top producing countries like China, Canada, the United States, France, and India doing, and how can we learn from that. So for a bit of context, on the right, you've got just the EU production there, and you can see that France is at nearly 15,000 hectares, which gives you a sense for a country which is so close to us and has quite a similar regulatory environment, but a little bit more light touch, where we could be if we had the investment and supportive government policy to encourage that. A really good case study that's very close geographically to us, that shows how even just some small tweaks to licensing can help to kickstart the hemp sector, is Jersey. So visited Jersey Hemp over the summer, and in Jersey they've recently changed their licensing regime. So as well as being able to harvest the seed and stem, growers are allowed to produce the flower. There's no restrictions on where the crop can be sited. So you can see here, there's a crop being grown right next to a row of houses. The licensing is being issued by the Jersey Health and Social Services Department, and they're working in collaboration with the Home Office. I think there is quite a strong possibility that the Home Office might take notes and use this as inspiration for how UK policy could evolve. But there's still challenges. So, for example, while if the plant is in the field, it's considered industrial hemp, as soon as the flowers are harvested, that's considered to be cannabis and therefore a controlled substance. So it needs to be dealt with in a very high security way, as if you're dealing with a drug. But it is opening up opportunities like producers being able to breed their own high CBD strains, which will obviously bring in revenue for the region, and also something that I think they're looking to be able to sell into UK growers as the UK market develops. I'm just going to whip through these, a few other examples. France got 14,500 hectares. Varieties cultivated are from the EU approved list. At the moment in the UK, I think Patrick might have said that, we have to grow to a THC level limit of 0.2%, but the European Parliament has just voted to increase that to 0.3%. So that will be opening up a lot of additional varieties that French growers can use. And something that I think we could learn a lot from is in France, they're using a cooperative model for growing by and large. So there are 6 big cooperatives primarily growing for fiber. So for things like composites for car panels and construction. And farmers are members of those cooperatives and then have access to processing facilities to break down from straw to shiv and fiber. Canada, another huge grower, 37,000 hectares grown in 2020, from only being legalized in 1998. And since 2018, recreational cannabis has been fully legalized, which has really opened up access to growing the crop. It means that there's no requirement for a criminal record check, although you do still have to grow, you still have to have a license, and it does still have to be below 0.3%. And the focus has really been on seed and CBD production there. United States, another country where hemp production has really been supercharged. 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp at a federal level, although there were growing trials happening prior to that on a state level. And I guess it's the US attitude that has just had a rocket under it. So they're already at 28,500 hectares being grown as of last year. There's been a little bit of fluctuation there because there's been such a huge interest in particularly growing for CBD, and often tobacco growers transitioning from growing for growing tobacco to growing hemp for CBD. And that's meant that there's been a lot of fluctuation in prices, and there have been some disappointed growers. And one of the particular challenges that licensing in the USA introduces is around plants testing hot. So as hemp farmers grow the plant, they have to test it for the level of THC in it. And if it's over the current level of 0.3%, then their crop has to be destroyed. They can't sell it, they can't use it. So there's currently a review happening to look to move the THC level to 1%. And there's also been quite a lot of funding for that federal hemp production program to be expanded. So, yep, China, another huge producer, actually the largest producer in the world, and a lot of that's for the domestic market. most of the hemp textiles. So if you're buying hemp shirts, hemp underwear, hemp bedding, a lot of that will be coming from China. And they also have a huge amount of domestic demand for hemp textiles. So I think that rounds off everything got to say. There's me and my lovely dog. I think she thinks the hemp field is cursed because every time I've taken her to check it, it's poured down with rain. Feel free to get in touch if you have any questions about licensing or suggestions for people that I should speak to for my research or questions, anything like that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Camilla. That's a brilliant summary of what it's like to be both a new hemp farmer and also someone looking at the international situation, and the fact that the UK is abysmally behind on that, even though it need not be. Interestingly enough, with Brexit, there was the opportunity for the UK to set its stall out as a sort of lead producer of hemp, lead producer of even cannabinoids in general from hemp, and dare I say it, cannabis more widely, but it chose not to go down that route, despite the fact that historically and current and most very recently, the UK was the largest exporter of cannabis, high THC cannabis in the world until very recently. And everyone might be surprised to hear that, but that comes from the high THC licensing side of things, and is related to perhaps why the government is so restrictive on industrial hemp production. I was going to talk a little bit now about the politics of this. So, you know, we can see that industrial hemp is really, really important for the future of farming in Britain, for the future of the planet in general. And if we're going to transition to a green new economy, what better plant than this emergent green new economy? And yet it's being stifled, and it's been stifled in three particular ways. Barriers to entry are being created at the hemp licensing level, around farmers being able to grow it. Now, even if you do get a hemp license, you're actually not allowed as a UK hemp farmer to harvest for the most lucrative part of the crop, CBD. And that's how hemp became a cropper back in 2019. That was the trouble we got into. To put this in perspective, as I said before, the crop we lost was worth 200,000 to us in seed and fiber products, but as CBD products, it would have been worth £2.4 million. That is, you know, vital money not going into British farming. And actually, as the biggest CBD consumers in Europe, in Britain, we're sending all of that money abroad. We're sending it all to Europe. We're sending it all to North America. And that's great for them, but you know, it doesn't make sense when you know, farmers in the UK would love to grow hemp and would love to profit from it. A quick story about a farmer we know up in Yorkshire who was offered £3 million one day by a CBD producer who wanted to come and harvest. This is a good few years ago now. Come to produce to harvest his flowers and leaves for CBD. He wouldn't have had to lift a finger. He was a struggling, hard-working hemp farmer, and so he wrote to the Home Office saying, "This is the situation. Can I accept this offer? I don't have to do anything, but I could really do with the funds." The Home Office said no, and instead that farmer had to destroy the leaves and flowers in the field. So effectively compost or even burn £3 million that he didn't have to lift a finger for. That was the situation hemp were in back in 2019. And that's the situation that all hemp farmers like Camilla up and down the country who have got hemp licenses are in. They have to destroy the most lucrative part of the crop. This is the second problem that we're facing. Not only is it hard to get a license, it's bureaucratic, unnecessary bureaucracy, a bureaucracy also, frankly, run by the wrong part of the civil service. you applied to get your hemp license. We saw that wonderful system error image from Camilla. You applied to get your hemp license from the Drugs and Firearms Unit of the Home Office, and you know, they are literally dealing with more important things, and so they have not given priority, in fairness, to this innocuous plant that doesn't pose any of the risks that any of the other things they're licensing, from guns to serious narcotics, poses. And so they just don't understand the needs of farmers. They don't really care, and they, you know, frankly, they've created a bureaucracy and a system that's not fit for purpose. And that's one of the reasons we're saying it should be scrapped. You know, arguably the wider campaign where we're saying there's no need to have a license for this crop, that it should just be regulated as any other arable crop, because it poses absolutely no risk, no health risk to the public, according to the World Health Organization. And the UK government hasn't made that claim either. But it does pose a potential risk to corporate players who are heavily invested in the cannabinoid industry. Now, Theresa May's husband works for a company called GW Pharmaceutical. GW Pharmaceutical, since the early 2000s, have held roughly 90% of the patents on cannabis around the world, and world leaders on cannabis. Now, you know, so directly, Theresa May, while she was at the Home Office, was benefiting from the drug policy as it was, because if industrial hemp farmers cannot harvest for cannabinoids, then the market is entirely protected for those with high THC licenses like GW Pharmaceutical hold, and very few other companies can get. And so she directly was benefiting from the drug policy that she created. Now, what's worse than this? When she moved on from the Home Office to become the Prime Minister, she appointed, very controversially, a junior minister called Victoria Atkins. Victoria Atkins is married to the MD of British Sugar, who grow all the cannabis for GW Pharmaceutical. And in 2018, the BBC called her out on this and said, doesn't this represent a conflict of interest, one that you should have declared, and one which affects your ability under the ministerial code to you know, fairly run this department and oversee this policy? To which she said, fair cop, I'll recuse myself from all drug policy decision making. Now, obviously, she's still the boss, or she was still the boss after that, and drug policy decisions aren't going to be made that upset your boss. But did she even do that? We're not 100% sure she did do that, because later on it came to light that she went to the UN and participated in a conference where one of the main topics was cannabis policy globally, and obviously from the UK perspective. And so that's currently subject to freedom of information requests. So we have to investigate the possibility that currently industrial hemp farmers are being excluded from harvesting the most lucrative part of their crop because of, frankly, old-fashioned corruption. Now that's where we were a few years ago, but it's got more complicated than that. There are other barriers to entry that have come in to stop ordinary small producers and hemp farmers from realizing that value. From the European Union came the Novel Foods Directive. Now, I won't go into too much detail because it's not directly relevant to farming. The Novel Foods Directive was the Novel Foods regime is a regime for licensing novel foods that are totally new, things that we haven't eaten before, at least before 1997 in the European area. And according to the European FSA, they weren't going to license CBD as a novel food because it's been consumed as part of hemp, at least at lower strength levels. for hundreds of years and thousands of years, in fact, and they had evidence to say that. Now, at the last minute, they decided to list it as a novel food, and back in early 2020, against the run of what they were briefing, how they were briefing the industry. This meant that now, if you want to sell, if you want to produce a cannabinoid product, you have to apply for a novel foods license, and that takes years and costs hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's only really available for producers with deep pockets. So again, that's ruling out most small-scale producers linked to small-scale hemp farming. Now, the UK with Brexit had an opportunity to not go along with that position that the rest of the EU had, and had an opportunity to diverge, and indeed seemed to be considering it, but in fact decided to go with it and maintain that situation, whereby a second major barrier to entry into realizing the value of this lucrative industry has been put in the way of grassroots farmers and grassroots producers. The third thing that is particular to the UK came this year, or earlier into 2021, sorry, when the Home Office decided that upon looking at the trace level of THC that was permitted in products, historically being tolerated at 0.2%, that instead of revising that up in line with what's common, what's becoming common around the world in North America in 0.3%, soon to be the rest of Europe 0.3%, Switzerland 1%, or even Jersey in the Channel Islands, which has a ratio of THC to CBD. They decided to reduce the amount of THC in trace THC allowed in a product 20 times, down to 0.01%. This is effectively undetectable. So this is effectively zero. Now, in order to remove the THC from a product, you probably in the UK will have to have a high THC license, because now you're taking the trace amounts of THC in hemp and removing it, and therefore concentrating it into a high THC process that you then have to remove. To get a high THC license in this country, because you're not going to spend less than £10 million, and that's just to get through the door. So we see that this whole industry in the UK has been locked off for the benefit of the very, very wealthy, in the form of these pharmaceutical companies, in effect, GW Pharmaceutical, who just sold out to for $7.3 trillion, I believe, to Jazz Pharmaceuticals, and then to a second layer of corporate investors, who these corporate investors have lobbied and campaigned for the novel foods implementation and for the low levels of THC to be kept in place, because they know that gives them a de facto monopoly on the market. So this is some of the sort of economics of what we're facing, some of the influencing some of the politics. And actually, we realized that most of that could be dealt with by just asserting what we really think, which is that we should not need to have a license to grow hemp in this country. There is no public health risk. We can license, we can regulate the products, we can regulate the health products, we can regulate the food, absolutely no problem. But there is no need for that license, and so that's why we've decided to start a campaign called Overgrow the Regime. It's going very well, and it's very simple. It calls for everyone to grow hemp for a green economy, for British farming, and for public health, and to grow it in their window boxes, to grow it in their gardens, in their allotments, and in the fields. And people are really excited to do this, really enthusiastic. And if they come to, and we had our first meeting on that back in October, there's been press on it. The Financial Times did a big piece about this last month, in fact. Can I share that with you? Maybe. Oh, no, I can't. Paywall. Hemp farmers lose their cool over post-Brexit regulations. Where's the rest? Oh yeah, I haven't paid my subscription to the FT. Apologies. We want everyone to grow hemp, and we want to support everyone to do that, both through legal support, through agronomical support, advice on how to grow it and how to harvest it and what you can use it for. If ordinary, British CBD users are going to have an inferior product that's only isolate, only synthetic isolate passing through the novel foods regime, then actually it's going to be far better for people to grow their own organic product and harvest it themselves and consume that in the way that actually high THC cannabis medicinal users had to until very recently, and still do in some respects. And so that's what we've done. We've got time for some questions. There's so much more to talk about, but we realise we've talked for long enough, and we should hear from everyone in the audience to see what you want to hear about. Questions to any of us about the politics, about the specifics of growing hemp, and about our experiences, or even if you just want to make a point that hasn't been made, because I know there's a lot of probably expert knowledge in the room.
Okay. Yeah, we've had loads of questions already while we've been talking in the chat, so perhaps I can start off sharing some of those, and then if other people want to ask questions, they can do, either put them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll try and get to them. So Dan has asked, could we please post links to the campaign and information on how and where to process, if there are co-ops in the UK, things like that?
Absolutely, I'll post that in the chat now. So it's overgrowtheregime.org, and the website's under construction, but you can put in your email and sign up to the newsletter, or you can email. What can you email? I just had it up on the screen just now. Let's share it again. You can email overgrowtheregime@protonmail.com, and we will be able to get you involved from there. But signing up for the newsletter is a basic at overgrowtheregime.org.
Okay, next question is from Sue, asking about using hemp for animal bedding and whether it could be used on poor soils and livestock farms so that they wouldn't have to bring in straw. Can it be harvested with conventional machinery? Sorry.
Yeah, there's actually a really weird old law that says that the Queen of England must have hemp straw for her horses because it's the best bedding straw. It's super absorbent. Yeah, it's amazing. So, simple answer is yes.
And also some questions about what the harvesting process would be in terms for hay.
So basically with harvesting hemp, because the fibre is so strong, you want to avoid rotary parts at all times. So if you're harvesting it for straw, for bedding or otherwise, it'd be with a reciprocating mower. So yeah, any kind of like rotary mower or a flail mower will just like wrap the fibre will wrap around it and it will break the machinery. Similarly with harvesting hemp for seed, it has to be a straw walker combine. Again, like a rotary combine will potentially like wrap up and break or even set on fire. So yeah, it's the strength of the fibre is, a blessing and a curse. Mainly a blessing, but it's just knowing how to deal with it.
Okay, question from Maddie. Tiny Host Community Bristol would love to build tinies with hemp. Do you know of any farmers or landowners in the west of England that's growing or interested in growing hemp? And would also like to know about the best and most affordable ways to build?
Yeah, I mean, I can
go for that, Joe.
Can answer that one as well. There are people growing in the west of England. There's some people called Bristol Hemp, so they'll probably be good people to chat to. But in terms of like the affordability of housing and building, like building in the bale, so just cutting the crop down, allowing it to wet, and then baling it into small bales, and then you build a foundation, like a little foundation wall, and then put a wooden ring beam around it with little spikes coming up, and then you can just use the bales like big blocks and stake them together using ideally coppiced hazel, and then spray the whole thing with lime slip and then plaster onto it. And it's a phenomenally cheap method of building, and it locks up huge amounts of carbon. So, I mean, we just built up at the COP26 in Glasgow. We just built a sauna there, which was, like tiny thing, like 3 meters by 4 meters and 3 meters high, and that locked up over a half ton of carbon, just in that small structure. And the cost of building in that way is less than £10 a square meter for a wall, which, if there's any architects or people who are into building will know that's just like, it's unbelievably cheap. So I mean, this I feel like is really our best hope of sort of combating climate change, is just that you can build these incredible houses that are like so cheap, lock up so much carbon. Like each one of those bales has got more than 10 kilos of carbon in it, and then you'll be using hundreds of them in each house. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what we all kind of need to do. And then obviously there's like barriers with like planning and the licensing and all that kind of stuff in the way, but it seems like the situation is urgent enough now that we should just ignore all of that bullshit and get on with it.
So, sorry, Patrick, did you want to?
No, go on. Have you got some questions? I was just
there's a lot of questions. So Louise asked about more info on how to grow without a license in the UK. I think you might have covered that off after she asked in your section, Patrick.
I did, but I just wanted to say it's very, very simple. You don't need to apply to anyone other than yourself. If you want, let us know at overgrowtheregime.org that you intend to do it, and we can support you to do that. We're calling on people to take direct action and do what is right, i.e. grow hemp, without the need for the permission of the Drugs and Firearms Unit at the Home Office, without the need for permission from the government at all. Producing a superfood, producing an ecologically sustainable material, producing medicine for ourselves and our families. These are all vitally important things that we're all doing right now. Creating a green new economy, not only for Britain, but also the planet and not least our farmers, is all vitally important. And actually, we can render the inept licensing regime redundant just by ignoring it, and just by hundreds and thousands of people growing a little bit of hemp, publicly saying so, and standing together to defend their right to do that without the permission from, frankly, what appears to be corrupt government.
And like, it's the under the sort of conventional notion of a crime, there has to be a victim, and by growing carbon negative houses that are cleaning the soil and supporting future crops, and there is no victim. So like, there just isn't a crime. And I think we've sort of got to the point now where we need to stand up for our right to do what is right. And if that is being suppressed by corrupt legislation, I think, it's our duty to test that out. Just to say also, like, the first 2 crops that we grew with hemp, and like in good faith, we didn't have a license, and there was no like prosecution, there was no further action from the government. So, I think the chances of it going there as well are just very slim. It's just, as Patrick said earlier, very small-minded cronyism, trying to keep wealth within a clique of people that already have phenomenal amounts of wealth, which is just, it's just so boring. And, given that this really is our best tool for combating climate change, it's, that's the crime, is stopping people from accessing the tools that could actually save us from climate chaos.
There is, in fact, a victims compensation fund that you can get, you can apply to if you've been a victim of crime. And so some guys from the campaign have decided that they're going to make a film finding the victims of industrial hemp. They want to find out who's been harmed from the growing of industrial hemp, and make a film about them and help them apply to the Victims of Crime Fund for compensation. So we'll see how that goes.
Follow-up question on that from Mad. Sorry.
No, carry on.
Follow-up question from that from Maddie. If someone was to grow 10 or 100 plants as part of the campaign, what would they do with it once it's been grown if they have no equipment or expertise?
Very good question. And yeah, maybe I will pass this over to Joe but just to say briefly, the campaign intends to not only act as a facility to support the action of growing hemp, we also want to educate people on how to grow it and how to process it to use in their everyday lives. So and Joe knows a hell of a lot more about this than I, and that is one of the people that's committed to making that information freely available to anyone doing that. So I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would depend on what scale people were working on and what equipment was available to them. But with standard farm machinery, you can grow hemp. There isn't anything special that's needed, for growing it for seed. It's an incredible source of, as we said before, protein and fat. It's like this huge growing market of people who want vegan protein, but a lot of it is coming from being imported from, tropical environments, that involve habitat destruction, etc., etc. So, just growing it as a food source for, yourself or your community, or selling it to other people who want to do that. You can build amazing houses out of it in the bale, which again, if people want to know how to do that, we're very happy to share that with them. But in terms of the economics of what you can get out of a field, like being able to get 3 houses out of a field is quite a good return, really, compared to conventional cereal crops. And there's this is another sort of challenge that we have, is to develop the infrastructure to make the processing of it easier. But and that really could transform a lot of stuff in the UK. And if the government was taking a responsible stance on it, that's what they would be doing, is investing money in providing that network of infrastructure that would make it easier for farmers to grow hemp, rather than creating these ridiculous loopholes and barriers to getting involved in this beautiful emergent industry. But I think as well, we're talking about people now as well, CBD being imported from Europe or America or different places in the world. But if your nan has arthritis and you want to make CBD, make a medicine that will help help her, you know, from plants that you've grown on in your window box or in your garden. I think, like, morally, you're absolutely, like, correct to do that. And again, that's a very easy thing to do that we can help you with. And there are just a lot of farmers, which, you know, increasingly we've, you know, heard stories of it today, but, you know, various farmers who are getting told that they can't grow hemp because it's, you know, there's a footpath along the side of it, or it's near to a road, or near to, and I guess what we're trying to do is encourage those farmers to say, look, like, we're trying to play the game. We're trying to go along with, like, the system, which is ridiculous, because the World Health Organization says there's no risk of harm. You're not protecting us from anything. Like, the regulations don't protect us from any harm that could be done to anyone. So those farmers, I guess, if there's enough of us and we're all together, should just grow it anyway, and then do whatever they were going to do with it, whether that's housing, seed crops, fibre. Yeah, the list is extensive.
I'll just add a little something to, you know, to the point Joe made about looking after your own health needs and the right to do that, or your family's or your community's health needs. You know, I didn't have time to go fully into the novel foods licensing regime, but the intelligence from the biggest players suggests that it may be that only CBD isolates are ever permitted, and it even may be, it's looking possible that only synthetic isolates are going to be permitted. Now, these are products that can realistically only be produced by people with deep pockets, let alone those who can get a license for it. But more importantly, they are factually considered to be inferior products by all the studies. They do not work as well as the actual plant. The full spectrum of cannabinoids, the oils closest to the natural plant, have the best results for the consumer. So people that rely on CBD for their health needs, so that are going to end up having an inferior product. And the only way to get around that, if that does become the case, is to grow your own industrial hemp and produce your own full spectrum CBD oil, which we can help you do via Overgrow the Regime or even at Hempen. So if you want to get in contact, Overgrow the Regime at protonmail.com, or for people that want support growing more at scale, info at hempen.co.uk, and Hempen offer a consultancy service where Joe is one of the consultants, along with a number of others.
Great. I'm conscious we're down to the last 2 minutes. Do we have time for another question?
Yeah, very brief one. Let's do a very quick one.
There's two that are policy related. One from Dan, asking if it would be possible that local councils could do what Jersey have done in order to bypass the Home Office, and also Maddie asking if there's an all-party parliamentary group discussing hemp in government.
Quick answers. On the first one, unfortunately, no. Local councils don't have that authority. The Home Office rules on the mainland, but most of the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man are diverging away from that. So we'll see how long that stays. And there is an APPG, and they've got interested in our campaign, and we've been invited to make contact since our big piece in the Financial Times last month highlighted this situation and highlighted, well, frankly, how much it's financially hurting Britain apart from anything else, and British farmers. So yeah, more to come on that. Please do get in contact if you have any more questions, or if you want to talk. Yeah, info at hempen.co.uk for me, and Overgrow the Regime at protonmail.com for anything related to the campaign. But you can get us on either. I just want to say thank you very much for Camilla for jumping on board and sharing her experience and her research, incredibly valuable research, which we really need in hemp farming, in British hemp farming. And also thank you to Joe for everything he's done for British hemp farming, but also for rising from his isolated sick bed the dreaded lurgy to against adverse technical obstacles to talk to us today. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks Camilla, thanks Joe, and please do be in contact.